Welcome to A Voice of Reason in Turbulent Times with Pastor Charles Burnett-Morrow. A powerful, practical, prophetic, and progressive commentary about what is happening in our world today.
Like, for instance, if I say to a waiter or waitress or somebody I'm doing business with that Tommy and I have been together for, 20 some odd years, so on and so forth. And oftentimes they will say something to the effect of, oh, well, that's great, and sometimes they'll say, well, my husband and I have been together for 10 years, y'all are 20-something years, wow, we've been together 10 years, And when people kind of open the door a little bit and they give me an opportunity, what I then do is I will go a little bit deeper in my conversation and I will say to them, for instance, and I have said, Tommy can tell you on any number of occasions, I've said, a lot of people think that gay people, and gay relationships are built on sex. I said, well, let me tell you something. If your relationship's foundation is sexual, you don't have much of a foundation. Said, honestly, all relationships are difficult. All relationships require work. All relationships have to have elements of mutual respect. They have to have elements of mutual admiration. They have to have elements of mutual appreciation. There has to be a purposeful devotion. I tell couples, straight and gay, when they come to me, I have to keep a cough drop in my mouth or else I'll be coughing all night. When people come to me wanting me to perform a wedding, I will counsel with them. And one of the first things that I will say to a couple that wants to be married, do you believe that love is the most important element in a marriage? Well, of course, 99% of people are going to respond, oh, yes, absolutely, because frankly, they think that's the answer that I'm looking for. And then I surprise them when I respond to them and I say, wrong, absolutely wrong. Let me tell you something. We all grew up with parents during the course of our lives and during the course of our relationship with our parents. There have been many times we've looked at them with admiration, appreciation. We have felt a great devotion to them. We felt a great deal of love for them. But then when we begin to go through our teens and we begin to try to develop a sense of independence and try to discover who we are and who we want to be as a person. Many of us have looked at mom or dad at some point or another, and we have thought to ourselves, man, I hate you. I can't stand you. And so listen, if you can look at your mother and your father and love them today and hate them tomorrow, only to turn around and love them again the day after tomorrow, what makes you think that in the course of a marriage, you are not going to have days, sometimes weeks or months, when you look across the table, you look to the other side of the bed, and you question, I don't know what on earth ever made me want to be with this person. There are times when there are aspects of their personality, there are things that they do, there are habits that they have that we live with and we learn to accept, and we kind of, just let it go and let it ride. But then there are those days when our patience is worn thin, when we're not feeling quite as well, and you know, we're not in the mood to put up with it and to deal with it. And then all of a sudden there's a big blow up and there's an argument. Now you're arguing over something that you probably have experienced with your partner several times in the last week or in the last month. But you haven't argued over it every single time. No. You go through periods. There are times when work requirements, family relationships, meaning relationships with other members of our family, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, kind of weigh us down, and our resistance lowers, and all of a sudden we just don't have the patience, we just don't have the ability to as easily overlook this aspect of our spouse's behavior like we normally would. I'll be honest, you know, Tommy and I go through this all the time. There are certain traits, again, I don't want to present myself as anything perfect, because I'm not. There are times when traits that I have that are constant. They're there all the time. I don't hear a word from Tommy about it for maybe months on end, and then all of a sudden he may have a day where he's really had a tough time at work and he's really struggled, and he comes home, he's worn out emotionally, psychologically, he's frazzled, and I do what I always do. I'm not doing anything new. I'm not acting in a different way than I normally act. But under that specific circumstance, he is not in the mood to deal with it. He's not in the deal to put up with it, you know, and it frustrates him and it makes him upset. And then we may wind up in an argument over it, or at least, at the very least, a heated discussion. And the same thing, of course, is true for he and I. There are certain traits that he has that, I'll be honest with you, I know exactly why he does this certain thing the way he does it. I understand where it comes from. I understand what kind of built that into his wiring and built that into the way he conducts himself. And therefore, for the most part, I'm able, excuse me, to dismiss that behavior, dismiss that particular thing most of the time. I'm just able to kind of, well, I know where it comes from, I know, But then there are those days when I'm worn out, when I'm psychologically and emotionally just worn to a frazzle. Maybe I'm going through a spiritual battle that is really causing me tremendous consternation and grief. And so all of a sudden he does exactly what he does all the time. It's nothing new. And this is why when couples argue, one of the most common phrases that you'll hear is, "You always do this," or "You always say that," or "You always respond this way." Well, if you always do this and you always run, then how come it's only now that we're sitting here talking about it, arguing about it, debating it? Well, it's because our love and our devotion, our appreciation, our admiration for that other person generally allows us to overlook that conduct. For the most part, we're able. But then there are those days when it is not as easy. There are times when we go through psychological and emotional valleys, which may last for months, folks, maybe even longer. You may go through valleys that are so long, and you struggle and you struggle. And during that time, I'm going to tell you, young couples, whether you want to hear this or not, whether you believe it or not, during those times, you're not going to feel all warm and fuzzy toward your partner. Woman, you're not going to feel warm and fuzzy toward your husband. Man, you're not going to feel warm and fuzzy toward your wife. LGBT person, you are not going to feel warm and fuzzy toward your spouse. Warm and fuzzy is a come and go emotion, okay? That is something that comes and goes. But what really matters, and I began all this by talking about, the notion that love is the most important aspect of a marriage or of a relationship. What really matters, what really counts, what really will make the difference is not the love, but it's going to be the commitment. You have got to be committed to your relationship. If you're committed to your relationship, even in the valleys, even in the dark times, even in the struggles, even when you're looking across the bed or looking across the dinner table and thinking to yourself, man, right now I can't even remember why I was attracted to him or to her to begin with. Excuse me. When you are committed to one another, even in those very dark moments, and folks, I'm warning you, those moments come. I don't care how great a relationship you have. I don't care how wonderfully y'all communicate. I don't care, how lovely your marriage is. There are those moments when, let me say it at least this way, when you look at your spouse, your partner, your wife, your husband, and you're not feeling the warm and fuzzies, okay? And so it is during those times that commitment is what will carry you. And what many people don't understand, and this is what I try to advise young couples who come to me wanting to be married. If you will be committed to one another through the dark times, what happens inevitably, what will happen is you will come back together. You will find that romantic connection. You will once again connect in that very intimate and wonderful way. It is like the tide. It rolls out sometimes and it comes in sometimes. And when it comes back in, you're going to be able to reconnect and reestablish. And those times, I'll tell you, in any relationship are absolutely wonderful. Those experiences, it's like when you've gone through a period of really struggling in your relationship. And again, remember, you're not struggling because that person has changed. You're not struggling because that person is 1 ounce different than they were the day you met them. No, they're the same identical person they've been throughout the entirety of your relationship. What has changed is your patience and your ability to overlook certain traits that normally you're warm and fuzzy, your love for them normally kind of helps you to just overlook and ignore certain things that otherwise would trouble you. But when the warm and fuzzies go away, all of a sudden we find ourselves in a very bad place. Most marriages end during those periods of time. And unfortunately, if the two people, both parties, were not fully, completely committed to one another from the beginning, then chances are no preacher, no counselor, no psychiatrist or psychologist is going to be able to save that marriage.
A voice of reason in turbulent times with Pastor Charles Burnett-Morrow, speaking truth at a time when truth is in short supply.